Okay, so here we are in, well, the last day of September 2022 with Janet. And Janet is she has just completed her second year of nursing and about to go into her third year of being a student nurse. And I can't actually quite believe it. I bet you can't believe it, Janet.
I can't. It seems like, in some respects, it seems like such a long year, and yet we're not even in October yet. And then in other ways, it feels like it's just flown by. So it's really weird, but I feel like I've made loads of progress and I've done loads of things, and it has been quite an intense year in little pockets. It's kind of been really rush, rush, rush some of the time, and then stop, 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 and then really rush, rush, rush again. And I've just finished a rush, 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 like literally yesterday. Yesterday was my last day on placement. So it was really nice, but it was everybody on my placement was like, can't believe it's your last day, and I'm like, neither can I. And the 6 weeks has gone by so quickly, and it was really lovely though. I went into that placement not thinking that it was going to be very great, and it turned out to be wonderful. So that's always a nice thing, isn't it?
Brilliant. Well, I thought it'd be quite nice to kind of just fire some questions at you to get you to kind of reflect over the last couple of years and just clear your mind right now, and then we'll just zone into those times. So thinking about placements, and you mentioned that the one that you just left is really good. Obviously, we're not going to make any reference to any specific names of places, but tell me about a couple of them that you've really, really enjoyed, and then tell me why.
Okay, so I really, really enjoyed my very first big placement in first year. That was on a spinal unit, and it was a spinal HDU actually. So it's kind of just the next level down from intensive care. So the patients on the HDU would more than likely come from intensive care first, and then into the spinal HDU. Very small number of beds. The people tended to stay there for quite a long time. So I developed relationships with those patients quite a lot, and there was it was like the way it's set up. It's like a little goldfish bowl inside of a bigger ward.
I'm with you. And just so people know, that's high dependency unit, isn't it? HDU.
Sorry, yes.
That's quite right.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that, but there might be some first years or healthcare assistants that are like, what is HDU?
Yeah.
And what makes the difference, the decision to move from intensive care to HDU? What would be the criteria?
I think a lot of that is about the nature of the person's injuries or illness, and when they reach the point that they can breathe independently, or that's not even true, because we did have some patients who still weren't breathing independently, but who didn't need one-to-one care anymore.
Yes, I'm with you.
On ITU, there would be the highest level of care would be one nurse to one patient. Whereas in HDU, in the so that's like intensive care as opposed to high dependency care. High dependency, we still had patients who were using like machines like CPAP machines to help them breathe, and they still had tracheostomies, that kind of thing. But it wasn't a one-to-one ratio with the nurses. Those four nurses the four patients were looked after by 2 to 3 nurses in a shift. So they were more independent.
Did you say that was your first placement?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a really big insight into nursing care, wasn't it?
Yeah. I kind of thought at that time, this is what nursing is, and of course it isn't. It's one aspect of nursing, it's one way to do nursing, but I went on to learn that actually that's still a very intensive way to nurse. But in other wards, there were a lot more people, a lot more patients, and a lot more nurses, and a lot more healthcare workers as well. In the high dependency unit, we only had a healthcare worker who wasn't there all of the time. So the nurses were doing every single job. Whereas in other wards, you generally get more of a split of work done with other grades of staff. But the nurses there would literally see the care through from the start of the shift through every single job with a patient right to the end of the shift. There wouldn't be anything they weren't doing. There's like no delegation of tasks. It was just nurse led all the time.
I actually think that was a wonderful, wonderful way for you to start.
Yeah, it was. I really loved it. And when I went into other environments, it wasn't a feeling of this is better or worse. It was just a feeling of, wow, this is the range of nursing. You know, it really helped bring it home to me how, because I've always said it, that there are so many different ways to nurse, but it was really clear to me that there are different ways to nurse that suit different types of people and suit you at different times of your nursing career. And it was I got some really nice contrasts moving into other areas, because the other one that I've really enjoyed over my 2 years so far has been the work on the medical unit that I did, that was very largely diabetes. This is a totally different scenario. This is a totally different ward, with lots of nurses, lots of healthcare workers, lots of patients. But the patients, by the very nature of it being just a medical ward, was that they were more independent. They were moving around. We had visitors back at that time as well, of course, because it's like 18 months later. That was another big change from the start of my training to now. We didn't have visitors when I first started my training.
Which actually made it even more difficult. Obviously, that's the other thing I know we've had plenty of discussions about this in the past, but it's important to stress that, you know, people visiting other people 9 times out of 10 are a real support and a real help to the people, those patients. And you really notice the difference when you don't have them.
Yeah, if you can imagine that you've had a neck injury that's left you with tetraplegic injuries, so you can't use your arms and you can't use your legs, and you're not allowed to see your loved ones in person. That was the situation that my patients were in those first 6 weeks when I started. The closest a visitor could get was the window. We faced out onto a little quadrangle, and patients could, if you were lucky enough to have the bed by the window, your visitors could come to the window to see you.
So you really needed to be there for a lot of emotional and psychological support because of the nature of people's situations. They really, really needed that, because that, you know, those were life-changing injuries and surgeries, etc.
Just talking about what was on the telly, you know, just talking about what I'd read in the newspaper, because some of the patients weren't reading newspapers. Just catching them up on what was going on in the outside world. You know, just 10 minutes here and there, just conversations about anything. You know, you find yourself talking about any old load of rubbish that makes people giggle, just because you've got to try and keep people's spirits up, and all those things that visitors would normally do. That's what nurses were doing and what healthcare workers were doing.
Incredible.
You know, it's so important that
really,
that's when
really
you realise.
Incredible, amazing. And so those are 2 really great examples of things that you've really enjoyed. And give me an example or 2 of situations in the last 2 years that you found really quite challenging.
Oh, loads. Yeah, every day brings a challenge in some respects. Getting up at 5 to 5 in the morning, that's a challenge.
Gosh, that's incredibly early. How come so early? Why do you choose that particular time?
Because I have a little dog, and
he
needed to be out first thing in the morning. And again, linked with that, the length of the days. You know, when I was going on to a shift that started at 7 o'clock and finished at 7:30, there was me and Milo were getting up at 5 to 5. We were having a half-hour walk. I was leaving the house at 6:20 to start a shift at 7 o'clock. I'd leave the hospital at 7:30. I'd get home about 8:10. Sometimes I was travelling much further. Sometimes it might be I had a 50-minute journey to work and back from work. So that meant 15-hour days. For Milo, this is not for me, this is for Milo, my dog. And he had a half an hour, 3/4 of an hour break in the middle of that from my wonderful dog walker, who Milo absolutely adores. She would come in halfway through his shift and look after him for me. And then he'd start his second 7-hour shift on his own. And that's a massive challenge. And you might say, well, why did I do it? Why did I put him through all of that? Well, I decided that I needed to do this now at the age of 49. How many more years can I leave it before I'm too old to do this? And Milo's 15, so it was kind of a case of we need to get this training done, and then hopefully I can make some choices about having more dog walking time that I can pay for him to be not on his own so long. And I do things like I get my husband to have a week off work, so he has Milo for like a week, and lighten the load on him. But just leaving him all that time, it's really hard. You do, people with families and everything else. These are the challenges that we face, isn't it? We have to make choices about how do we get the training done, but still look after all of our other responsibilities and all of our other passions in life, and try and find balance somewhere along the line.
Important. As I've said to you before, in the work that I do with nurses and healthcare assistants, the work-life balance underpins everything that we discuss, because it has to. So, I mean, this is an ongoing conversation for you, because, obviously this time next year, when it's all over for you, in fact, it won't be this time, it'll be the summer, won't it, next year?
Well, even worse, January 2024.
You'll still be doing long days, unless, of course, you choose a specialism or an area that has kind of normalized hours. And I think this is something that was on the radio today, actually, as well. On Women's Hour, it was on Radio 4 today. Some nurses were calling in just saying how the 12-hour shifts were designed such a long time ago, and they do not reflect how we live our lives now. And with the crisis that we have ongoing, it really is taking a massive toll. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you feel, being in the system, that it's why do you feel that they haven't addressed this and changed the hours to make it much more accessible for people?
There's two sides to that, isn't there? Because I speak to a lot of nurses who do prefer the longer shifts, because although those days are hard when you're on shift, they've got more time off. So they'll do the 3 shifts a week, but that gives them 4 days off
together, which is what I used to do
yeah,
myself.
Yeah. But at the same time, there are also people who it doesn't suit. And when you look around other professions, there aren't many other professions that work this way. Even I worked in the police, and the civilian posts in the police don't work 12.5-hour shifts.
No.
But for some reason, it's stuck with nursing. And I think that, yes, I do want to support those nurses who want those shifts. If they want them, they should be able to have them. But equally, for people who would rather work 8-hour shifts more often, then I think we should make it possible for that to happen as well. It shouldn't be a one or the other situation, because I feel like really the only reason it is one or the other is because it suits the organisation to do that. But the organisation is made up of individuals, and so if it doesn't suit the individuals, then there should be more options. So personally, I would like to see more flexibility for people to adapt their hours to suit them, because when you're, even for those nurses who wish to do the longer shifts, they are not seeing their children and their loved ones for that entire day. And also, I do think it takes its toll on the quality of people's work too.
Yeah, and the
There's
quality of
no
their
way.
life generally, their health and their
Yeah.
well-being generally.
Yes.
You know, I
Yes.
understand the concept of 4 days off. I used to have it, but I think there just needs to be a big mindset shift around it to make it, you know, much more accessible, because I think you could probably suggest that the hours themselves are one of the many factors that have added to burnout.
Oh yeah, definitely. Totally.
So
Mm.
yeah, it really does need to be addressed, doesn't it?
Mm.
Okay, so if I was a first year student nurse just joining the you know, the whole kit and caboodle, um, what would be your top 2 tips to give me about my training right now you know, in 2022, moving
Mm.
forward to 25 or whatever?
Yeah.
What would
And
be your takeaways?
I'd say my first one would be about the academic side of things, because that's the thing about nursing degrees. You've got very much two halves to this match. That you've got the academic side going on, and then you've got the placement, the practical side going on. And sometimes people have got great placement skills, great doing skills. They come with experience of the care sector already, perhaps, and they work really well in the placement setting. But they can be a bit overwhelmed by the academic side. And
Hmm.
what I'd say about that is the things that I've learned from now doing 2 degrees, and from the first degree being at a time when we didn't even have the internet. I have been alive that long. Is just really about organisation around those academic skills. That it's different from school, it's different from college. There's much more of a focus on independent study at university. The university does provide lots of things to read and lots of literature to plough your way through, but they don't always do it in a very prescriptive way. So it's not very often that they'll say, right, you will sit down and you will study for 2 hours today. They don't do that. They say, you're all grown ups, you can make your own decisions about how and when you're going to study. And that can be difficult for some people because they would prefer to be told what to do and when to do it. In a university academic setting, that's not going to happen. But the things that work best, from my experience, is preparing for things, getting started early on essays. So we'll know that there's going to be a deadline. It'll be January, and we'll know that the deadline for the essay is going to be June, and that's written in the course handbook. And I have friends who, by mid-May, will have not started that essay yet. And, and for me, they've then given themselves 2 weeks to write an essay, which they actually had the date for in January. So for me, the only way, I don't cope well under pressure with last minute deadlines. I like to know that I've got everything organised, everything planned. So if I know I've got that deadline coming up in June, I will be starting to work from the minute I know I've got that deadline. So from January, I will be starting to prepare. I'll be doing the lessons online. I'll be doing the reading surrounding it. I'll be writing down some of my references. I use RefWorks, by the way. RefWorks is the most amazing reference gathering package ever invented. I'm going to marry RefWorks.
Oh, that's good advice though,
Yes,
to be
it
able to
really is.
share
That's
that.
that's my
Yeah.
bonus tip, that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, just getting started early on things. Not
Yes.
they have this habit of giving you 3 deadlines quite close together. So, but we know that well in advance. So get one essay out of the way in the first couple of months. Start on the next one. Get that out of the way. Start on the next one. Don't try writing essays while you're on placement. because that just does not work. 12.5 hour shifts combined with trying to write an essay, that never works. So look at your course structure, see where the blocks of time are that you're really going to need your energy for being on placement, and just then going home and relaxing and doing not much more. And keep your study time, your weeks in university, keep that for writing essays. For me, that very strict separation, and thinking ahead of where these deadlines are, and whether there's a deadline actually during a placement period. If that's the case, get your essay written before you go on
Yeah,
placement.
great,
So
great,
much
great
easier.
advice. So, did you have anybody telling you this?
No, I discovered this when I was 18 and I failed my A levels. That's how I learnt it. And I don't really want other people to find it out the same way.
Yeah,
Because
no,
that,
it's great advice. But when you started your first year as a nurse, did you have any third year students or any qualified nurses come in and mentor or give you guys top tips on what to do?
honestly, no, we
Don't you
didn't.
think that would be a really great thing to do?
It would. We have reps. We do have student reps, and we did have one session with them during our induction period, and they gave us some great advice.
But
But
they're not nurses though, are they?
well, no, they're on the nursing course. They were third year student
Oh, they
nurses.
were. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Sorry,
they
beg
were.
pardon.
Yeah, but it was limited how much. I guess if I'd reached out, I could get to them. Um, but really, no, that's kind of the extent of the contacts. Maybe it's because I don't really feel like I need that much more support at the moment. But it would probably be nice going into third year to have a bit more support, because it is starting to feel a bit more real now. And maybe the university will arrange for us to speak to them. There's a very good chance that they will put on a session during our next induction into third year, where they will get the reps to who they would be the ones from the previous cohort to us, to give us advice then.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that makes total sense, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
here's a big question. What are your thoughts on student nurses actually being paid for their placements?
I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. I read the Nurses.co.uk article on that. Was it
Mm.
Millie, I want to say? I read her article. I thought it was brilliant. I agreed with all of her arguments, and I actually put a comment on her article myself, because she said that student nurses would start to pay for car parking soon. Well, we are already paying for car parking. I do think that there's an argument to pay students, because actually I feel like that student nurses are being relied upon already in the NHS. We're already fulfilling much more than a supernumerary role.
Tell me a little bit about that, because that's changed, hasn't it, recently?
Yeah. We are supposed to be there as extras to the numbers. That's what the NMC, that's their standard that they uphold, that student nurses aren't in the numbers. But honestly, I feel like we are included in the numbers. And my lived experience on wards is that I've been involved in discussions where I know that we've been included in however many staff is on the floor at that particular time. And that's about safety. That's about safety of patients. And it's when they're looking to move people around the hospital because they're trying to fill the gaps where there's shortages of staff. And student nurses are helping to fill those shortages, and that was never what was intended for student nurses. I can see why it needs to happen, because there are staff shortages, and we
But
do
that's
need
all the
to.
more reason that you should be paid.
Exactly, yeah. This is exactly, and some student nurses were paid during the pandemic, and I think there's an argument that we should be paid now. That if things aren't going to change that quickly in the short term with the way staffing is, so we are going to be required to ensure the safety of patients on a daily basis, and in which case, I mean, there are all kinds of insurance related issues to that on a corporate level, and when you're talking about volunteers, which is what we are, there are issues involved in putting responsibility onto volunteers in that way. And so if this is how things are going to go for the next few years, if numbers aren't going to go up of nurses, universities have cut the numbers of students they're taking on. That's been in the news. We have an attrition rate in nursing courses where we start off with so many on the cohort, but we lose people over the length of the course. So you might start off with 350 on your cohort, but is that the number of students who leave in third year? It isn't. So these are all things that need to be addressed really with a long-term plan. Short-term fixes of using students to fill gaps is not a good strategy.
No, I absolutely agree. It's actually quite shocking. And do you think maybe if people were to look at it, it would be from the second year student nurses onwards, maybe just the first year not being paid, so they kind of like embed their learning and then the question is also at what level, because I think from what you've said before, the gaps that you're filling is very much in an HCA role, which is fundamentally so supportive. It's salt of the earth care. It really is vital. But at your level, just going into your third year, you could make a comparison to the new nursing associate role, which kind of hovers between a band 3 and a band 4, and they literally are not the go between, they are the bridge between the HCA and the nurse, which is in essence where you are. So I mean,
I do think that first year should be a lot about the very I don't want to say the very basic skills, because that's not what I mean. The fundamental skills of nursing is actually based around the nursing patient relationship, and the best way to learn about the nursing patient relationship is to be in that most vulnerable situation where you are delivering very personal skills with a complete stranger. And how you do that with dignity and respect, it's a massive skill to learn.
unbelievable.
And this is so important in the
it just
first
makes
year.
me all kind of
If you get that right in your early training as a nurse, that your whole way of nursing will be built on that for the next 20-30 years. And so I have absolutely no problem with first years learning those fundamental skills, and being recognised for those skills. By the end of year 2, we should be pushing on more to the clinical skills of nursing, which includes your venipuncture, your cannulation, your medication administration, more of the balance of the body's systems and how different parts of the nursing procedures are going to affect those systems. I've learned a lot about this in orthopedics and post-surgical, so those are more your nursing associate skills.
Yes, absolutely.
And if there wasn't more of a clear delineation in the progression of the placements, in terms of, if you're a first year, these are the things that you're going to be requested to do. But in second year, it's going to be a different set of skills.
You're kind of up leveling each year. I mean, that is the idea, isn't it? I mean, and then the third year, more and more clinical skills and an introduction into leadership and management.
Yes, where you're taking on a full caseload of patients, where you're not just dipping in and out of their care, you're providing the entirety of their care the day you're on shift, which will be a big change for me, because I have tended to treat my 2 years so far as dipping in and out of the bits that I think I can do. Whereas in third year, one of my personal goals is to not ignore the bits that I don't feel uncomfortable with. The bits that I feel a bit nervous about, they're the things that I need to be doing in order to get the feedback whether I'm doing it right or wrong, and then make changes to what I'm doing there and
Absolutely
then.
right, Janet. Yeah, you're so right. I would absolutely agree with what you said. I think the third year, I'm laughing because it's as if I can remember it, is but just having spoken to lots of people, I still remember lots of things. Um, it's really about being present in the moment and looking for opportunities in your day to really push yourself out. So, for example, maybe in your first or possibly your second year, in the handover scenario, you'd have been much more of an observer and a listener. But as you move into your third year, you're really kind of stepping up and being visible and taking a really big part in, you know, how things are orchestrated in the day, and just being present for that moment, you know, and appreciating that you have the skills and the personality to add value and make a difference to not only your patients but the rest of the team on that day. And I think that's a very big difference. I think there's there's a really lovely growing of confidence and self-esteem as you enter your final year, which you will carry for with you forever.
Mm,
So,
mm,
I mean,
mm.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. It's a great example, the handover, isn't it? Because I remember the first handover I went into, and it was just like someone was speaking a foreign language. You know, I recognised the sounds of the words, but none of it made any sense. There was all sorts of
The
here can see this,
acronyms, the
H for you,
acronyms.
that. Yeah, yeah, loads of them, and we're going to do a PACU, and there's going to be a PICO, and I'm not sure what the difference between a PACU and a PICO is, and just really, yeah, just whoosh
Yeah,
straight over the top of my head,
yeah.
and but now I can even have a little chuckle to myself now when I sit in a handover and I can think, oh my God, I remember when none of this made any sense to me at all. And now I can tell you what the BMI is and what the all of these other things are, and but also I'm actively listening. I'm not just letting people say the words and they're going into the air and they're doing nothing. That I'm actively listening because I'm listening for the changes from previous days for particular patients, and I'm thinking ahead towards their discharge plans, which are also dependent on what we're being told in handover. And I'm thinking, I'm starting to put my little square boxes on that nurses then put a nice little tick in when they've done things.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm using that information to inform myself about what I need to be doing today.
Yeah,
And that's a real progression.
it
You
really
know,
is. And I love that word that you're, you know, informing yourself, because you have to take responsibility for that. And
yeah.
you also have to take accountability for it,
Mm,
because nobody else is, you know, there's certain skills and certain things that, excuse me, procedures and all kinds of things that you need to be able to do that in that day.
mm,
You'll always have support around you,
mm.
but you've got to take ownership of those, because
Yes.
that belongs to you.
Yeah.
And if for any reason you can't see it through, or you know, you have to be
Mm,
able to disseminate that information onto other people so that it gets picked up or it gets addressed in some way. So
yeah.
it's phenomenal, really, what you learn. So we've
Mm,
only got a little bit longer, and you know, you and I, we always have these like slightly controversial conversations, which I think is great, because we're in a world where that can't happen. And talking of the world, you know, in the time, even within the last year, so much has happened, Janet, hasn't it? Like,
mm,
you know, the death of our lovely Queen, and the war in Ukraine, obviously
mhm.
COVID being a really big thing.
Yeah.
There's some evidence that's come out today, or some data that's come out today, I should say, from the Nuffield Trust, saying that over the last year, 30,000 nurses have actually left the profession,
Mm,
and that there's currently 1 in 10 vacancies. I
mm,
personally think it's probably higher than that, but I
mm,
just, without, you know, like I always say, we need to end on a high, but I don't want to bring you down with doom and gloom on that. But I did want to get your take as a nurse of the future, what you thought about that.
Yeah, yeah. We are living in very turbulent times. It just seems like we seem to have been facing one thing after another, don't we, as a world?
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
and and it is difficult sometimes to think, well, like it's even difficult to plan ahead because we don't even know. I think it really, everything from the pandemic onwards kind of shook our our idea that things will just carry on the way they are. The world will keep turning. It'll always be this way. And I think from the pandemic onwards, we've realised that things won't always be the way they've been. We will face challenges that we've not had before. We will come out of them, and we'll come out of them stronger, because I do believe that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But it will challenge our perception that things will be able to rely on the same truths and the same things happening in a year's time as they are now. Who would ever have thought that a thing like the war in Ukraine would be having such a major impact? And I
Yeah.
think that the impact of that is going to go on for years, because I think that it's changing the way power and politics happens, and we are going to be living with those consequences for many years to come. But equally, just on a more local level and on perhaps a more transient level, losing the Queen, I think that it was such a mood changer. It really did. The mood of the nation was so somber at the idea of losing this really. I'm not a massive royalist in the sense of if you're born to it, then it makes you a king or a queen. But I really respected the way that lady lived her life.
Her life of service was
Yes,
unbelievable. And,
yes.
I do feel that there is a profound crossover with our
Mm,
conversations
yeah,
because we enter a life of service, obviously
yeah.
not at the same level, but it's the
Mm,
same thing. It's that dedication and,
mm.
that commitment to doing whatever you can for the best possible patient outcome,
Yes,
no
yes,
matter what type thing.
yeah,
And I think she lived that too. But yes, it is
yeah.
challenging. And how do you feel yourself about entering into this winter?
Mm,
Because with all
mm,
the things that have happened in the world,
mm.
there is potentially going to be an awful lot more mental health issues.
Yeah,
And we've also had a degree of freedom again, and so there's a possibility that the flu season could be really, really bad. And with that comes, the the bowel kind of problems, with difficile, etc., all those kinds of
mhm,
things which we
mm.
haven't seen for a little while because obviously there's been so much isolation. So it's going to be quite a challenge. It's going to be a very challenging time.
Yeah,
How do you feel like you're kind of setting yourself up for that?
well, we've said before how I train in one trust, but I also do NHSP in another trust, and that other trust has already gone back to wearing face masks.
Mhm.
Um, and they're talking about this twindemic now, aren't they, of coronavirus plus the flu virus, which could hit hospitals hard, could hit every sector of the NHS hard. And I may find myself in a situation where I'm doing a lot more NHSP work because I'm needed and I won't be at university at this time. We'll be on study leave and holidays and all kinds of things. And I imagine that demand is going to increase in hospitals. We are going to see rises again. We might find nationally the NHS does go back into higher levels of PPE to cope, and that is going to put stresses on the staff again, and just having coronavirus around more and having flu around is going to put stresses on, and nationally we're going to be trying to find ways to cope with that. So we're going to be relying on that good old resilience again, aren't we? That they
Yes,
keep telling us
definitely.
about.
See, I hadn't realised that you stopped wearing a mask, only because I personally haven't been in the hospital environment for over a year. I've been in the vaccination environment with some work that we've done.
Yeah.
Everybody was wearing masks there still.
Yeah.
So there's
No,
okay.
the in as a rule at the moment, unless you're in HDU or in the high dependency unit or in intensive care, we're not wearing masks. If it's just a general medical ward or a general general surgical ward,
Yeah,
or clinics, they're not wearing masks there. But the rules keep changing as numbers go up and come back down. The masks go on and come back off, and I think the masks are starting to go back on again. So it could all be coming back for Christmas by the time, you know, these viruses get hold of us again over the winter. Then there could be quite a few situations where we're back in a mask. Hopefully it is only going to be the NHS and not the general population. Don't think there's any talk of that in shops and places, but we are always the first line where the masks come back in the NHS, because obviously we don't want to bring it into the hospital environment if we can help it.
Of course.
We've still got patients with COVID on the wards. As soon as they're identified, they're moved into side rooms and barrier nursed. We're not seeing the deaths that we were, which is obviously really great. But it's still there. It's still an issue that we need to deal with, and we need to be vigilant. We need to be looking out for new variants and everything else. So yeah, it's still I think
it's a really big challenge, isn't it?
This is the way it's going to be now. It's going to be constant monitoring of what do we need to do to protect. And of course, the thing has always got to be, we need to be ahead of it. So it's better to take precautionary measures,
of course,
than
like
to let things get out of hand.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And have you still been enjoying your NHSP work?
Oh yes, I love it very much. The opportunity to use that to find out about areas of work that I haven't experienced on placement is really great. And of course, it puts a bit of money in the bank, which is also really lovely.
And just as a matter of interest with them, do they pay you at a kind of nursing associate level?
I get enhancements because I think there's an enhancement for agency work. I mean, you mustn't quote me on this. You must look all this up yourselves if you're interested in doing it. But the pay is certainly very good on NHSP for weekend shifts and for night shifts, because those are the shifts that attract enhancements anyway. So I do pay tax on the NHSP wages. I sort my own. Well, actually, I pay some insurance, national insurance, through the NHSP anyway. But because I was self-employed already, then I kind of take care of that as well. But it is decent money. For I tend to work Sundays because you get an enhancement for Sundays. Don't do many night shifts. The night shifts are even better, but I'm not a night shift person. So I go for the Sundays because it's halfway to the best, the highest rate. But yeah, it's great. Definitely it is worth doing. Because we've been talking about the things that I've learned over the last 2 years, and you wanted to finish on a high. I've actually got some thank yous. Can I say my thank yous?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I have 3 thank yous to make. And the first one is to a nurse who taught me what a really good mentor looks like. This nurse, she was just wonderful in the way that she worked with student nurses. And she, in the short space of time that I had with her, she just gave me such a lot of confidence in my abilities. She allowed me to get involved in patients' care, and she made me feel like my opinion counted, even though I was a first year student.
Wonderful.
And that I was already contributing to patients' care. You know, that I wasn't just making up the numbers or filling in gaps or or any of those things. I was actually contributing to patient care. My opinion of what was happening for that patient, she wanted to hear that, and I loved that.
Yes,
It
and
was
that was
really,
really confidence building for you.
yes,
Excellent.
yeah. So that's my first thank you, is to that nurse and what she does for students. And there's been loads of nurses like her who were just really made for teaching other students. You know, it's
Mm,
really a skill. My second thank you is to the patient who taught me all about stoma care. I'd never seen a stoma. This person had two stomas, which she named, and she told me loads about what life's like to live with stomas.
amazing.
And that was just such a valuable, just over an hour I spent with her. And she gave me some demonstrations, and she taught me some tips and tricks about these are the things that really work, and don't attempt to do this even though they say you should, because that doesn't work.
Yeah,
But
and
the
she would
way,
absolutely know because she's so living
yes,
it. How
yes,
wonderful to have that
yes,
knowledge. Yeah.
that's right, yeah. And my final thank you is to the student who taught me how to iron my uniform while it's still on a coat hanger.
With a normal iron or one of the ones that
Yes,
go
yeah,
upright.
with a normal iron.
Oh, that's those are skills. Those
Yes,
are.
yeah. The minute your uniforms come out of the washing machine, you put them on your coat hangers, you zip them up so they're in shape, you let them dry on the coat hangers, and then you put it on your ironing board, still on the hanger, and you iron. And it literally takes 10 seconds.
So how do you manage not to get like
Really,
like
it
that
works.
mark within the inside?
It just works. I promise you, it works, and it just saves so much time. You know,
Oh,
when you're
that's so
constantly washing and
cool.
ironing
I love
uniform.
that. Top
I do not
tips.
iron. Yes, I
Top
do not
tips.
iron
I
in
don't
real
iron
life.
either.
No,
Top
but
tips for nurses.
uniforms. Yeah. So there you go.
Oh, that's
That's my three
absolutely
thank
brilliant.
yous.
Well, I'm going to do a fourth thank you, and I'm going to say, first of all, congratulations to you for getting this far. It's a very short road now to the end. You must be absolutely delighted, and it is going to fly round. But this is an exciting time for you coming up. All these amazing skills are going to come into the fore. And as I said from the very first time we ever started talking, you are an amazing nurse already. So I just want to say big thank you for, you know, sharing all your lovely gems and sharing your gifts, Janet. So really appreciate that. And we will catch up at the end of October. We'll have to decide on what we're going to do then, but there's never a dull moment, and there's plenty of things to talk about. So we'll catch up
Thank you.
then.
Yeah, thank you
But
so much. It's a pleasure. I've loved it.
lovely to see you as always. You take care.
See you then. Bye bye.
Bye.